Welcome to Night Creepypasta Rules, where strange jobs come with stranger instructions, and following them may be the only way to survive the night. Tonight's entry is more than a story. It's a warning. An isolated inn in the woods of Vermont, a receptionist working the graveyard shift, and 3 rules etched in quiet urgency. Never hand scissors to room 11. Deny the woman in black her request. And no matter how many times the bell rings, never open the door if no one is there. They sound like superstition, don't they? They're not. Stay with this story until the end. What starts as a quiet job will unravel into something ancient, intelligent, and impossibly cruel. And when the truth comes for you, like it did for Simon Adler, it won't knock. It rings 3 times. Leave a comment if you've ever stayed in a place that felt wrong, even in daylight. And subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules if you want more tales that don't end when the credits roll. Now, let me take you behind the desk. At Black Hollow Inn, the glossy brochure for Black Hollow Inn promised historic charm and quiet seclusion in the rolling hills of rural Vermont. It raved about period details and peaceful nights. It failed to mention the night shift comes with 3 rules more binding, and frankly more terrifying, than any clause in the minimalist employment contract I'd signed. Pulling up the long, winding gravel driveway as twilight bled into dusk, the inn certainly delivered on the historic part. It loomed out of the encroaching woods, old dark timber, steep gables, and mullioned windows that glittered like watchful eyes in the fading light. It looked less like a charming getaway, more like something plucked from a Gothic novel, brooding and silent under the darkening sky. The air itself felt heavy, scented with pine needles, damp earth, and the faint, melancholic smell of wood smoke. Pushing open the heavy oak front door felt like stepping into a different century. The lobby was dimly lit, dominated by a massive stone fireplace, currently cold, and a grandfather clock ticking with funereal solemnity in a shadowy corner. Worn velvet armchairs huddled like conspirators on a faded Persian rug. Dark wood paneling absorbed the light, and oil portraits stared down from the walls, their subjects long dead but their painted eyes disconcertingly lifelike. The silence inside was thick, broken only by the clock's hypnotic tick-tock and the faint creak of floorboards somewhere overhead. Behind the imposing oak reception desk stood Mrs. Beatrice Holloway, the innkeeper. She was exactly as I'd pictured from her brief, brittle phone calls. Elderly, bird-like, dressed in severe, old-fashioned black lace, with silver hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the skin over her sharp cheekbones. Her eyes, however, were bright and missed nothing. "Mr. Adler," she greeted, her voice crisp and precise, offering a cool, dry hand. "You are punctual. Excellent. Punctuality is valued at Black Hollow." She gave me a swift, efficient tour behind the desk. The antique switchboard, the guest ledger bound in cracked leather, the heavy brass room keys hanging on hooks. She pointed out Mr. Edgar Carmichael, the inn's only visible long-term resident, engrossed in a thick, leather-bound book near the cold fireplace. He merely grunted in acknowledgement, not looking up. Then Mrs. Holloway lowered her voice, her bright eyes fixing on mine. "Now, Mr. Adler, your duties are simple. Check-ins, inquiries, ensuring the guest's comfort. However, this inn, it has its idiosyncrasies. For your safety and the continued tranquility of Black Hollow, there are 3 procedures you must adhere to without fail during the night shift." She recited them calmly, her tone making the bizarre instructions sound like standard hotel policy. 1. Should the occupant of room 11, she gestured vaguely towards the shadowed upper floors, request scissors for any reason via the internal phone, you will politely inform them none are available until morning. Do not offer alternatives. 2. If a woman dressed entirely in black, perhaps with a veil, approaches the desk inquiring about the Red Room, you will state firmly that the room is closed indefinitely for maintenance. Do not engage further. 3. The front doorbell may ring occasionally. Check the peephole or monitor. If no one is physically present outside, ignore it. If it rings a second time with no one there, ignore it again. Under no circumstances are you to open the door on the third phantom ring. Are we clear? My mouth felt dry. Scissors? A woman in black. A red room? Phantom doorbells? This sounded like the setup for a bad ghost story, not hotel procedures. Perfectly clear, Mrs. Holloway. I lied, trying to keep my voice steady. I needed this job. The quiet, the paycheck. I could handle a few eccentric rules, couldn't I? Maybe it was just her way of dealing with prank calls or local legends. Excellent, she said, giving a tight little nod. My apartment is through the door behind the desk if an actual emergency arises. Otherwise, I trust you will manage. With that, she turned and glided away, disappearing through the indicated door, leaving me alone in the vast, silent lobby with the ticking clock and the watching portraits. The first few hours were unnervingly quiet. No calls, no guests arriving or leaving. Just the creaks and groans of the old building settling around me. I tried to read, but the atmosphere was too heavy, the silence too loud. I felt exposed behind the desk, as if unseen eyes were tracking my movements from the shadowy corners. A draft snaked around my ankles, though all the windows were shut tight. Around 11 p.m., a young woman, Miss Genevieve LaRue, according to the late reservation note Mrs. Holloway had left, checked in. She looked pale, exhausted, her eyes darting nervously around the lobby as she signed the register with a trembling hand. She clutched her single bag tightly and practically fled up the grand staircase, without a word beyond confirming her name. Her unease was infectious, settling over me like another layer of dust. Just after midnight, the antique telephone on the desk let out a shrill, jarring ring that made me jump halfway out of my skin. I snatched up the receiver. Black Hollow Inn, Simon speaking. Static crackled on the line, thick and heavy. Then a voice, barely a whisper, faint and dry like rustling leaves. Is room 11 occupied tonight? I glanced instinctively at the heavy brass key for room 11, hanging ominously on its hook behind me. Then at the ledger. Oh, yes, I confirmed, my own voice sounding tight. Yes, it is. The line clicked, dead, leaving only the low hum of the dial tone, and a sudden chilling conviction that the rules Mrs. Holloway had given me were not suggestions, not eccentricities, but something much, much more serious. The dead line hummed in my ear, amplifying the oppressive silence of the lobby. Room 11, occupied. Who had called? And why that question? Shaking my head, trying to dismiss it as a prank or a crossed wire, I went back to organizing the already organized pamphlets on the desk. Less than an hour later, the internal phone buzzed, the light indicating room 11 glowing softly. My stomach plummeted. I picked it up hesitantly. Front desk, Simon speaking. Yes, hello, a voice replied. Male, polite, but with an odd, strained quality, like someone speaking through tightly clenched teeth. Terribly sorry to bother you so late, but I seem to have misplaced my... grooming kit. Would it be terribly inconvenient to borrow a small pair of scissors? Scissors. Rule 1 jumped to the front of my mind, neon bright and flashing. Say they're unavailable. I'm very sorry, sir. I forced out, trying to keep my voice steady. All our office supplies, including scissors, are locked away in the main office overnight. Nothing available until Mrs. Holloway arrives in the morning. There was a pause, filled only by faint static. Then, the strained voice again, tighter now. I see. Most inconvenient. Click. The line went dead again. I slammed the receiver down, my hand trembling. Denying such a simple request felt absurd, almost rude. Yet the certainty that I had just averted something terrible settled deep in my gut. What in God's name happened in room 11, involving scissors? Liar. Unable to shake the unease, I pulled out the heavy, leather-bound guest register from under the counter. Flipping back through the yellowed pages, I found the entries for room 11. They were patchy, weeks, sometimes months, where the room was listed as under maintenance, despite no obvious work being done according to other logs. Scattered guest entries were annotated with brief, spidery notes in Mrs. Holloway's precise hand. Complained of noises. Requested early checkout. Distressed. Item broken. Unavoidable. One entry simply read, "Incident cleaned. Cleaned. Cleaned." When I casually asked Mrs. Holloway about the room the next evening handover, she waved a dismissive hand. "Just an older room, dear. Prone to drafts. Nothing to concern yourself with." Mr. Carmichael, however, passing through the lobby later, paused by the desk. "Room 11, you ask?" he murmured, peering at me over his spectacles. "Ah, yes. Some rooms. They hold onto things tighter than others. Echoes, you know. Long memories." He shuffled off towards the library, leaving me colder than before. My nerves frayed further when a pipe burst in the West Wing corridor around 3 a.m. Just a mundane plumbing issue in an old building. But it forced me to navigate dimly lit, creaking hallways armed with towels and a bucket, the silence pressing in, every shadow seeming to writhe. As I passed the closed door of room 11, I could have sworn I heard it. A faint, rhythmic snip, snip, snip sound from within. Imagination? Or the echo Carmichael mentioned? I didn't linger to find out. Back at the relative safety of the front desk, drying my damp hands, I glanced towards the grand staircase leading to the upper floors. Standing perfectly still in the deep shadows at the top, barely visible, was a figure, tall, slender, dressed head to toe in severe, old-fashioned black, her face obscured by darkness and what looked like a heavy veil. The woman in black. Before I could react, call out, or even fully process her sudden appearance, the woman in black began to descend the stairs. Her movement was unnervingly fluid, silent. Her feet made no sound on the thick carpet runner. She glided across the lobby towards the reception desk, a faint, almost forgotten scent of lavender and dust trailing in her wake. Up close, the veil was thick, completely obscuring her features, lending her an unnerving anonymity. "Good evening," she said, her voice a low, melodic whisper, strangely calming yet deeply unsettling. "I require lodging. Is the red room available?" The specific phrasing, the unnatural calm, sent a jolt through me. Rule 2. "Tell her it's closed for maintenance." "I'm very sorry, madam," I replied, keeping my voice level despite the tremor I felt starting in my hands. "The red room is currently closed for long-term maintenance and is unavailable." The veiled head tilted slightly, as if considering my words. The air around the desk grew noticeably colder. I could feel her gaze on me, intense, questioning, even though I couldn't see her eyes. It felt like minutes passed in that heavy silence, marked only by the loud ticking of the grandfather clock. Then, with a nod so slight it was barely perceptible, she turned and drifted back towards the staircase, melting into the shadows at the top, as silently as she had appeared. Gone. Had she ever been there? Where was the red room? Did it even exist? The encounter left me deeply shaken. The inn, which had felt merely old and perhaps slightly spooky, now felt actively watchful, charged with unseen currents. Later that night, precisely at midnight, the grandfather clock didn't chime 12 times. It chimed 13 distinct, resonant bongs before falling silent. Lights in the hallway leading towards room 11 flickered in a strange, rhythmic pattern completely independent of any power fluctuations. The cold spots became more frequent, more intense, particularly near the spot where the woman in black had stood. Mr. Carmichael found me staring blankly at the clock the next evening. "Ah, the old timekeeper," he chuckled, though his eyes were sharp. "Has its own schedule, wouldn't you say?" like the inn itself. He leaned closer conspiratorially. Heard stories, about rooms that aren't on the official map anymore. Renovations that walled off more than just plumbing. A boudoir, they called one. Apparently decorated all in crimson velvet after a rather passionate tragedy. He winked, tapping the side of his nose, before shuffling off. Meanwhile, Miss LaRue, the nervous guest from the night before, seemed even more distressed, asking me agitated questions about drafts, strange noises, and whether anyone else had reported seeing a woman in mourning. Mrs. Holloway, during handover, simply advised me curtly to pay no mind to Mr. Carmichael's fanciful tales, and reminded me that locking the outer wing doors after midnight was imperative for guest security. It felt less like security, more like confinement. It was heading towards 1 a.m., the inn wrapped in its usual profound quiet, when the silence was shattered by the loud, echoing ring of the main front doorbell. Startled, I went to the heavy oak door, peering through the fisheye lens of the peephole. The porch light illuminated the empty, rain-slicked entryway and the dark woods beyond. Nothing. No one. Just the wind sighing through the pines. My hand rested on the heavy deadbolt, unnerved. Just kids? A wiring glitch. I went back to the desk, trying to shake off the unease. 10 minutes later, it rang again, louder this time, more insistent, the chime echoing aggressively through the silent lobby. Again, I checked the peephole. Empty, wind and rain lashed against the windows, but there was absolutely no one on the porch. Old dread began to creep up my spine. Rule 3. Don't open it the third time. I waited, nerves stretched taut, listening to the grandfather clock tick off the seconds, each one feeling like an eternity. The wind howled outside. Then it came. Howled outside. Then it came. The third ring. Not just loud. Violent. It felt like the sound vibrated through the very wood of the door, a frantic, demanding summons. Every instinct screamed at me to open it, to confront whatever prankster or phantom was out there. But Mrs. Holloway's calm, cold voice echoed in my memory. Under no circumstances. I stood frozen behind the desk, hands gripping the edge, staring at the front door, convinced I could feel something pressing against it from the other side. Something immense and unseen, wanting desperately to be let in. The ringing went on for a full minute, battering my nerves, then abruptly stopped, leaving a silence more terrifying than the noise. The storm raged outside, trapping the few guests inside, rattling the old inn's windows. The already tense atmosphere thickened. The internal line from room 11 buzzed again, the voice fainter now, raspier, asking not for scissors, but simply for something sharp. Anything sharp. I repeated the unavailable mantra, my voice shaking, and hung up quickly. Later, doing a quick patrol of the ground floor corridors, I saw a flicker of black fabric disappear around a corner at the far end. The woman in black, or my overactive imagination. The breaking point came with Ms. LaRue. She burst into the lobby from the staircase, hysterical, hair wild, eyes wide with terror, claiming the woman in black had been in her room, standing silently by her bed, and that someone had been rattling her doorknob insistently just moments ago. "What is this place?" she shrieked, grabbing my arm. "You have to tell me. What's going on here?" Her panic was infectious, threatened to shatter my own fragile composure. Trying to calm her, deflecting her questions while my own heart hammered, felt like juggling knives. It was while searching for Mrs. Holloway's emergency contact number, as per the flimsy protocol for distressed guests, in the bottom drawer of the reception desk, later that night, that my fingers brushed against something else. A thin, leather-bound ledger hidden beneath a false bottom. Not the guest register. This one was older, filled with Mrs. Holloway's spidery script. Dates, room numbers, brief notes. Incident RM11. Minor appeasement required. OVIB sighting, corridor locked. Phantom bell. Sequence incomplete. Stable. And lists of expenses. Silver polish. Heavy grade, lavender oil. Bulk, specialist cleaning services. Discretion assured. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just an inn with ghosts. It was a managed containment site. Mrs. Holloway wasn't just an innkeeper. She was a warden. Just as I slid the ledger back, Mrs. Holloway emerged silently from her apartment door behind the desk, her expression perfectly composed. "Ah, Simon," she said calmly, as if sensing my discovery. "A moment, please. Due to the storm, travel is difficult. We are expecting a very important guest shortly, a long-standing client who requires particular arrangements. They may arrive late, and their needs might seem unusual. I trust you will accommodate them precisely as I instruct, without question. Their comfort, and the inn's continued tranquility, depend upon it." She handed me a small, sealed envelope containing typed instructions, her eyes holding mine with unnerving intensity. The storm raged outside, rattling the antique window panes, each gust of wind sounding like a mournful cry. Inside, the air in the lobby crackled with a tension that had nothing to do with the weather. I clutched the sealed envelope Mrs. Holloway had given me, its cryptic instructions feeling heavy and ominous in my hand. Accommodate immediately. Needs might seem unusual. Tranquility depends upon it. Vague, unsettling, and directly contradicting the survival rules that now felt like the only sane things in this place. The grandfather clock ticked with agonizing slowness, each second stretching towards some unseen precipice. Lights flickered overhead, casting dancing shadows that seemed to deepen and coalesce in the corners of my eyes. Then, she was simply there, not through the front door, which remained bolted against the storm, and the phantom ringing that had ceased hours ago. One moment, the space near the grand staircase was empty, filled only with shadows. The next, the woman in black stood there, silent, radiating an aura of profound cold and ancient sorrow. Her black veil shifted slightly, as if stirred by a breeze that didn't exist in the stuffy lobby. She glided towards the desk, stopping directly in front of me. The faint scent of lavender and dust, sharper now, filled the air. "The time is appropriate," she whispered, her voice like dry silk. "I require the key for the red room." My blood ran cold. Rule 2. Tell her it's closed for maintenance. But Holloway's instructions, which I'd ripped open with trembling fingers minutes before, were chillingly specific. Should the lady request the Crimson Suite key here euphemism, I realized with horror during inclement weather after 2 a.m. Provide it without comment. Master key a 7. Necessary for equilibrium. Equilibrium or appeasement. This was it. The direct contradiction. The impossible choice. I started, my voice catching. "The room is..." "Give her the key, Simon." Mrs. Holloway's voice, sharp and commanding, cut through the tension. She emerged from the door behind the desk, her frail appearance utterly at odds with the steel in her eyes. She held a small, ornate silver box, clutched in her wrinkled hands. "It is necessary. Tonight, the barrier is thin. She requires passage to her sanctuary to maintain the balance. Otherwise..." She gestured vaguely, a look of deep-seated fear flickering behind her composure. "Otherwise, the echo becomes dissonant, unmanageable. For all of us." So that was it. Not just containment, but managed release. A ritual appeasement, and I was the unwilling acolyte, forced to choose between a specific haunting and unleashing. "What?" The woman in black remained silent, waiting, radiating cold patience. The key, heavy brass a 7, hung on its hook behind me, seeming to pulse with a faint red light only I could see. "No," I heard myself say, the word tasting like defiance and terror. The room is closed. I clung to the original rule, the one that felt like self-preservation, not ritual sacrifice. Mrs. Holloway's eyes widened fractionally. "You fool! You don't understand what you've done." The woman in black reacted instantly. A low moan escaped from behind the veil, escalating into a sound of pure anguish and fury that vibrated through the very floorboards. The temperature in the lobby plummeted. Frost spider-webbed across the nearest windows. Simultaneously upstairs, a door slammed open with violent force. Room 11. A wave of icy air, carrying the faint, metallic scent of blood, and the terrifying snip-snip sound, rushed down the staircase. From the main entrance, a thunderous boom-boom-boom erupted as the phantom doorbell entity began hammering against the locked door, the thick oak groaning and splintering under the assault. The hollow echo, denied its ritual, was breaking free. "Imbecile!" Mrs. Holloway shrieked, fumbling with the silver box she held. "You've broken the accord." The woman in black drifted towards me, her form seeming to waver and grow taller, darker. The lights flickered wildly, casting the lobby into strobing chaos, revealing glimpses of other figures, translucent, weeping specters clinging to the banisters, shadowy forms coalescing near the portraits. Mr. Carmichael appeared at the entrance to the library, his face ashen. "The Red Room," he croaked. "Don't let her reach it. It's not a sanctuary. It's the source." The woman in black ignored him, her veiled face fixed on me, or rather on the key rack behind me. She raised a hand, unnaturally long fingers extending from her black sleeve. But as she moved, Miss LaRue stumbled down the staircase, screaming incoherently, tripping and falling into her path. The woman in black paused, distracted for a fatal second. Seeing my chance, fueled by adrenaline and Carmichael's warning, I acted. I grabbed the heavy guest ledger from the desk and hurled it with all my might. Not at the woman in black, but at the grandfather clock in the corner. It struck the glass face with a satisfying smash. Gears shrieked, whites crashed, and the clock shuddered to a final jarring halt. The effect was instantaneous and bizarre. The overlapping sounds, the pounding, the snipping, the moaning, faltered for a beat. The strobing light steadied slightly. It was as if the inn's internal rhythm, anchored by the clock, was crucial to the manifestation. Mrs. Holloway screamed in rage, distracted from her silver box. "The timepiece! You've broken the timing! You've broken the timing!" The woman in black hissed, turning her veiled face towards me again. But the momentary disruption had given me an idea. The Red Room was the source. Holloway needed her to access it periodically. Maybe Rule 2 wasn't just about denial, but about control. "Looking for the Red Room?" I yelled, my voice hoarse, backing away towards the hallway Carmichael had indicated earlier held walled-off sections. "It's not closed for maintenance. It's this way." It was a mad gamble, a bluff based on Carmichael's cryptic words and Holloway's panic. The woman in black hesitated, seemingly confused by the contradiction, her attention momentarily diverted from the key rack. Mrs. Holloway shrieked, "No, don't listen to him," trying to regain control. In that moment of confusion, I scooped up the heavy brass key for room 11, not a 7, but room 11, from its hook. As the woman in black turned back towards me, drawn by my defiance, I threw the key with all my strength, not at her, but up the main staircase, towards the open door of room 11 from which the cold and snipping sounds emanated. "Maybe he needs the key more," I shouted. The reaction was explosive. A blast of icy energy erupted from room 11, meeting the dark presence of the woman in black on the stairs. The two forces collided with a deafening psychic scream. Lights exploded overhead, plunging the lobby into near darkness, lit only by the flashing emergency signs and the splintering wood of the front door, finally giving way under the relentless pounding. Mrs. Holloway screamed as the conflicting energies washed over her, the silver box flying from her hands. I didn't wait to see the outcome. I turned, and sprinted through the chaos, diving behind the solid oak reception desk as the front door burst inwards, revealing not a physical entity, but a wave of crushing silence and pressure that swept through the lobby, extinguishing the remaining emergency lights and plunging everything into absolute, terrifying blackness. The silence that rushed in after the psychic scream and the explosive energy backlash was absolute, deafening. Dust motes danced in the faint, flickering beams of the emergency lights that hadn't shattered. The air tasted thick with ozone, pulverized plaster, and the metallic tang of fear. Slowly, cautiously, I pushed myself up from behind the reception desk, ears ringing, every muscle aching. The lobby was a disaster zone. The heavy front door hung splintered on its hinges, revealing the rain-lashed darkness outside. The grandfather clock lay shattered, its pendulum still. Debris littered the floor of the woman in black and the chaotic energy from room 11. There was no immediate sign, only a lingering, unnatural chill in the air, and the faint, persistent smell of lavender and something cold, like static electricity. My eyes searched the gloom for Mrs. Holloway. I found her slumped against the far wall, near where the silver box had flown from her hands. She was alive, breathing shallowly, her eyes open but vacant, staring unseeingly at the ceiling. The backlash, or the breaking of her control, seemed to have severed some vital connection, leaving her physically unharmed, but psychically absent. The silver box lay near her hand, sprung open, revealing compartments lined with faded velvet, containing strange, dried herbs, small carved stones, and tarnished silver charms. Her tools for managing the unmanageable. Mr. Carmichael emerged hesitantly from the library doorway, looking pale but unharmed. "The balance disrupted," he whispered, his gaze sweeping the ruined lobby. "You defied the ritual, boy. Dangerous. Very dangerous." Miss LaRue was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps she had fled during the chaos or retreated back to her room. Kneeling beside Mrs. Holloway, I saw her lips move almost imperceptibly. I leaned closer. "Must watch," she breathed, a faint rattle in her chest. "Rules, protocols, different, equilibrium." Her eyes fluttered closed, her breathing evening out into a shallow, coma-like state. She was alive, but lost somewhere words couldn't reach. The weight of it all crashed down on me. The inn wasn't just haunted. It was a complex ecosystem of contained energies, managed through bizarre rules and apparently periodic rituals, overseen by this now broken woman. My defiance hadn't banished the ghosts. It had likely just thrown the delicate, terrifying balance into chaos. What would happen now? As I stood up, feeling utterly lost, my foot brushed against something small on the rug, near where the woman in black had last stood. I bent down and picked it up. An antique silver locket, intricately engraved, but tarnished with age. It wasn't Holloway's or LaRue's. I thumbed it open. Inside, protected behind clouded glass, was a miniature portrait of a young woman with startlingly sad eyes, dressed in clothing from perhaps a century ago. A former guest. A victim. A victim? The woman in black herself, before grief consumed her. Holding it sent a faint vibration up my arm, a whisper of old sorrow. This inn didn't just have echoes. It held onto souls. And now, with Mrs. Holloway gone from its helm, who was left to keep them from consuming everything? Dawn broke gray and weeping outside the splintered front door. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sodden, unnaturally quiet world. Inside Black Hollow Inn, the silence was different. Heavy, watchful, expectant. The emergency lights had died, plunging the lobby back into deep shadow. lit only by the weak dawn light filtering through the dirty windows. The phone lines were dead. The radio only produced static. We were cut off. I tried the front door, expecting the oppressive force I'd felt during the phantom ringing. But now, it felt different. Not free exactly, but hesitant, as if the inn itself, its controlling consciousness fractured with Holloway's incapacitation, was unsure of its own boundaries. Mr. Carmichael, surprisingly practical beneath his academic eccentricity, helped me board up the broken door with loose planks from the cellar. Miss LaRue remained locked in her room, refusing to answer. "She can't leave now, you know," Carmichael murmured, hammering a nail with surprising force. "None of us can. Not really. Not until the balance is restored." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of pity and scholarly curiosity. "The inn. It requires a keeper. Someone to understand the currents, maintain the protocols. The real ones. Not just the surface rules Holloway fed the temporary staff." He gestured towards Mrs. Holloway, now resting quietly on a sofa, breathing shallowly. She kept meticulous records, hidden for her successor. He was right. Hidden within a secret compartment in Holloway's desk, I found another ledger. This one detailed the true history, the nature of the entities bound here, the heartbroken spirit, in room 11 eternally seeking its lost implement, the grieving woman in black, tied to the hidden red room, a place of both her deepest sorrow and unwound power. The entity at the door, born of collective fear from travelers who died, lost on the old road outside. It detailed the rituals, the offerings, the specific ways the rules maintained, not just employee survival, but the fragile containment grid that kept these sorrowful, sometimes dangerous, echoes from spilling out into the world. It spoke of the innkeeper not as an owner, but as a conduit, absorbing and regulating the inn's psychic pressure, a burden passed down, willingly or not. Escape felt irrelevant. Leaving felt like abandoning a post, like unleashing something terrible through sheer negligence. Looking at Holloway's notes, at the locket I still held, at the watchful shadows in the corners, I felt an unnerving sense of understanding click into place. The fear was still there, but it was joined by a strange, weary sense of responsibility. Time passed. Maybe a year, maybe more. Black Hollow Inn stood silent, but maintained. Repairs were made discreetly. Mrs. Holloway remained lost in her own quiet stillness, cared for in her apartment. Mr. Carmichael continued his research, occasionally offering cryptic advice. Ms. LaRue eventually left, seemingly having found some peace, or perhaps just exhausted by the fear, and I remained. The final scene finds me behind the polished oak reception desk. The lobby is clean, quiet. The grandfather clock, painstakingly repaired by Carmichael, ticks steadily. Sunlight streams through the windows, but the shadows in the corners remain deep. A young man sits opposite me, hopeful, nervous. The new applicant for the night shift position. The duties are straightforward, mostly. I explain, my voice calm, measured, echoing Mrs. Holloway's cadence more than I'd like to admit. But this inn, it has its idiosyncrasies. For your safety, there are 3 procedures you must adhere to without fail. I slide the familiar laminated card across the desk. 1. If the guest in room 11 asks for scissors, say they're not available. I watch his face, see the flicker of disbelief, the dawning unease. I offer no further explanation. Some things cannot be explained, only managed. The clock begins to chime. I have become the innkeeper. The watch continues. There is no vacancy here. Not really. We are all permanent residents in the Hollow Echo. You've heard the rules. You've seen what happens when you break them. But the most terrifying truth, the rules aren't protection. They're containment. And someone has to enforce them. Someone always has to stay behind the desk. Simon Adler started his shift expecting quiet nights and old ghosts. What he got was a promotion. to innkeeper. A title that comes with keys, yes, but also with watching eyes, a sealed red room, and a bell that never stops ringing. Now it's your turn. If you were in Simon's place, would you follow the rules? Comment below. And if you're brave, or foolish, subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules. Because next week's story isn't about a hotel. It's about the room you're in right now. The echo is growing, and it's listening.